right, our camera's working today. Take out your prayers. Did the bell ring?
Sorry.
Oh, you're the ding-a-ling.
I told the dinger that I would do it.
Did you say, oh, you're the ding-a-ling?
Yeah. That's the technical term for a bell ring. Actually, tintinnabulous.
There you go. Yeah, right.
But I prefer the archaic version.
Yeah.
All right, Friday. Adonai Yemachem. Nitparala. Chokreni el. Vadad levavi. Bechaneni vada sarapai. Ure im derech otzev bi. Uncheni baderech olam. Amen. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Amen. All right, let's take a look here and see if we have any verbs that we're talking about today in this prayer. Okay, not on the first line. Okay, we haven't done that yet. Ra'ah. So look at the third line, first word. Ure. See that? Resh, Aleph, Hey. What does that mean? What do those root letters mean? Resh, Aleph, Hey. Matthew? To see. Okay, so that's the see if. The im is if following it. So, and why is it u and not the? Why is it ooh? Right. Don't forget the bump schwa.
Yeah.
It's Friday after all. If they do the bump schwa, they say ooh, right? In Canaan land. So there's a schwa there with that resh. So that's why you get it ooh. That's the and. See. Now this happens to be an imperative, and we haven't covered imperative yet, but it is a third hey verb. Resh, aleph, hey. Actually doubly weak because it's what's the other weakness in it? Maybe triply weak if you count the resh, but what's the other weakness?
The olive.
The olive, right? It's a two guttural and a third guttural, but we're looking at a subset of that today, the third hey. Okay. Let's see, any others? Okay, probably nacha. Uncheni is nacha, and we lost the hey there. Nun chet, hey. And that ni is me. So a couple of different concepts we haven't covered yet, but we do have a couple of these verbs. So one where the hey is still there in resh, aleph, hey, ra'ah, to see. Re, see. And then in nacha, nun chet, hey, the hey has been lost. All right, so bear with me on a couple of other things we haven't covered yet. We will see both of those other features this term, but one of the things we're talking about today is the class of verbs, the third hey verbs. All right? So before we do that, let's review some things about verbs. What is a verb called that is regular in Hebrew? Micah?
Strong verb?
A strong verb. Strong. It can't be changed, can't be moved, can't be affected. Strong. Okay? What is an irregular verb called in Hebrew?
Weak.
It's weak. It can get pushed. It can get pushed around. It can get beat up and changed and moved around. Okay. So we have strong verbs and weak verbs. Let's see if we can remember the 5 types of weak verbs that I gave you. I'm combining some just to simplify it so that you get an overview. Otherwise, it feels like, oh, there's so many. How am I going to remember all these? They're really 5 types. Okay, so let's see if we can name all 5 types. Huh. All right, what's one type?
Guttural?
Gutturals. Yeah, that's the biggie. The gutturals. It could be in any position. There we go. Okay. Remember when we talk about weak roots, we have to classify them according to the position of the weakness. Is it in the first root letter, the second root letter, the third root letter, and the type of weakness? So here we have 1, 2, or 3 gutturals. Okay, who can name another weak verb type? Micah?
One new.
One noon. Okay, that's very good of you to mention that one, since we're going to be talking about that one today. Gregory?
Hollows.
Hollows, okay. Hollows. What's another way to refer to a hollow verb? What does the hollowness refer to?
The number 2 position is weak, but it's
The number 2 position has what? You're almost there.
guttural.
Not a guttural. Not a guttural. It has a certain type of letter in the second position that indicates its weakness.
The yod vav.
You're right. 2 yod vav. That's called a hollow. So like kum. See, it has a vav here in the middle. Okay. That's a hollow because it's really a vav helping letter standing in there like a consonant, but it's not really a consonant there. It's actually weak in the middle there. It's a hollow in the middle. That's where this expression hollow comes from. It's missing something in the middle. Okay. 2 more. Who can name another one? It's kind of like this one, but it's not in this position. Sam.
Olive 3 olive?
Okay.
Or is that under the guttural?
We did, yeah, that would be under here. Yeah. So he treats it as its own category, but it's a subtype of this. Ian.
What I remember from number 5 was it's the Gemini. It's the 2 equals 3.
Okay, 2 equals 3. That's right. So the second root letter is the same as the third root letter.
Gemini.
Okay, yeah, geminate. But it's right, it comes from Gemini. The twinning, it's a twinning one. So geminate root. Like savav, to go around. Savav. See that? Bait. These are twin letters here in the second and third root letters. You can't have it in the first and second, only in the second and third. Okay, who can remember this third one? But you already got one, so okay, all right, Micah.
1 yod vav.
Okay, 1 yod vav. Good job. 1 yod vav, like yashav.
Did we talk about a mnemonic for this one? I was just helping my son with the mnemonic for this one. He said, I can't remember this one. I said, well, how about if you said, you shove a guy and he sits down? You shove a guy. Because sit down or to dwell. Okay, so I'll give you that one too. What's a one noon? Can you think of one that we've had? Na'ah is a noun. Na'ah means a young man. You're right, it has a noon, but it's not a verb.
Nassau.
Tyler?
Nassau. To lift.
Oh, yeah. NASA, we have liftoff. Yeah, that's right. It's a double week. NASA. That's a one noon, and it also has an aleph over here too, but so we have these like this. Okay, so good. 5 types of weak verbs, 5 major types. You can have gutturals in first, second, or third position. You can have a one noon, or a one yod vav, or a 2 yod vav, also known as hollow, or a root where the second and third root letters are identical, also known as geminate. Okay? Today we're going to look at another type of guttural, the third hey, and we're also going to start to look at the second category, the one noon. Okay? And we're going to, let's start here, and then we'll come back and we'll look at this third hey because it's a little more complicated next. All right? Any questions about these weak verbs? Tyler?
So for looking forward to the quiz.
Oh, I'm glad to hear you're looking forward to the quiz.
I meant it both ways.
I am too.
So I guess will you expect the paradigms of the ones that we've gone through? Like today we're going through 3 hey and 1 none. So should we be able to reproduce those paradigms?
That's a good question. No, I'm not going to ask you to do the whole paradigm. Basically what I'm doing here is I want to make things easier for you. Might not always feel that way, but that's what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to help you so that you don't have to expend as much effort. Okay? You have to memorize certain things, but I'm trying to show you what do you have to memorize and what can you learn some principles and modifications on things you've already learned. Okay? So you must know the perfect paradigm of the strong verb. You must know the imperfect paradigm. So again, right now, that's where we're going, and on the final we're going to do parsing verbs and sentences with verbs. Okay, that's where we're going. So everybody knows that's where we're going. If you still need to keep working on those, and I would say keep reviewing them. You must know those. But for all these weak verbs, I'm going to introduce to you a handful of features for each one, and those are the things I want you to learn, because those are modifications on the paradigm that you already know of the strong verb. You see how that's much more efficient than learning every single one as another paradigm, because it's like multiplying forms you have to memorize. So that's the approach. That's the heuristic, is learn the regular pattern and then learn modifications to that pattern in each of these cases. Okay, so in each case there'll only be a couple things, a few things that you need to learn about that. So today I'm going to give you some, of those features, and we'll look at some forms, but we're not going to be trying to produce the whole paradigm. Does that make sense? How we approach these things? Okay. So yeah, look for the principles in each case. All right. Speaking of principles, we've learned that certain letters have their idiosyncrasies, right? Certain groups of letters, like the gutturals, have certain things in common. And then last time we saw that aleph, as a guttural, it has guttural features, but it also has some of its own features, its own characteristics. Who can think of a feature of the aleph that's unique to the aleph?
It likes segel.
It likes the segel. Yeah, don't ask me why. But it has an attraction for the segel. Maybe it likes bowling. But Yeah, that's right. Can you think of another one? Actually, maybe more important even than that one. Sorry to say, that was a good. You got it, but there might be an even more important one. Feature of the olive that we talked about last time. Went by fairly quickly, but it's pretty important.
I
Gregory?
don't recall how it's shy, so it doesn't.
Very good, very
I don't
good,
know
excellent.
How to put that together.
It's shy at parties.
Alright.
You know, it wouldn't be out there doing the bump schwa. It's going to be standing, on the side. Gets quiet at the party. Doesn't want to talk. Sometimes it talks. Sometimes Olive is quiet, and then somebody else has to make up for it. So the vowel is going to get lengthened when the olive is quiet, because somebody's got to talk, right? Even if the olive won't talk. Okay, so that's called being quiescent. Okay, you can think of it as it's getting quiet. It has, and the way you can tell when an olive is quiescent is it has no vowels and no schwa. It has nothing under it. It's just an olive sitting there with nothing. And for all intents and purposes, it's ceased to function. Because for us, it has a silent pronunciation, but it's still holding a consonant place, unless it becomes quiescent, and then it doesn't even do that. And generally, we'll have the preceding vowel lengthening to make up for it, okay? So there are a couple features of the olive. All right, yep, Micah?
How do you spell quiescent?
Good question. Does he use that word? I'll give it a stab, and we'll see. Let's see. I think he just says it gets silent. It's silent. So yeah, here. That's my guess. I'll look it up, and if it's wrong, then I'll correct myself. But I don't think he uses it. He just says it gets silent. So anyway, I don't spell that word every day. I think that's right. I'll check it. Okay, quiescent. But that is how you say it, or quiescent. Quiescent. Tomato. All right, so what we're going to look at now is the feature of the noon. And actually, we did touch on this briefly and quickly before, the noon. Does anybody remember what we said about the noon? What is its unique superpower? Gregory?
It hides in the next letter, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one way to say it. That's not linguistically, technically the way you say it, but we talk this way as a way to remember and think about how it works. But so yeah, you can think of it as hiding. What is it? How does it show up as? As a strong dagesh. So yeah, so if you want to go with this analogy or this expression, it's hiding. If it hides in the other letter, then you have a little beady eye peeking out at you. That dagesh is peeking out to tell you that the noon is hiding in there. Okay, technically, in terms of linguistic terminology, it has assimilated to the following consonant. And so this is the basic rule for the noon. When it is within a word and it is found without a vowel, which would mean it's at the end of a syllable, right? So a noon with a schwa, because the schwa is marking, a silent schwa is marking it at the end of it. And we'll look at examples of this in just a second, but I'm just going to state it here. A noon without a vowel in the middle of a word will assimilate to the following consonant, and it'll match it. Another way you can think of it, it's like a chameleon, it's matching. Now, how will it show up? It will show up with a strong dagesh, which is the doubling dagesh. It's a dagesh that indicates that doubled letter that has now been created by the noon. And so it won't be a noon anymore, it'll be a strong dagesh. Follow that? Okay. So, so far we have our perfect and imperfect paradigms. okay, or conjugations. And there are some more conjugations that we're going to learn later, but so far, these are the ones we have. These are the biggest ones. So we're spending our time on these. The same principles that you're going to be learning for weak verbs will also apply to all the other conjugations. Okay? Really a handful of other conjugations that we still have to cover. I'm thinking of infinitive, imperative, participle, that sort of thing. Okay? So, the nice thing about the perfect with the one noon is what? What's the feature of the perfect conjugation? It's called the blank conjugation.
Suffixes?
The suffix conjugation. That's correct. The imperfect is referred to as the prefix conjugation. The perfect is the suffix, because perfects have no prefixes. It's all suffixes, right? Katal, katala, katal, katal, katalti. Okay? So they're all suffixes. So that's nice when it comes to one noon, because nothing's going to mess with the noon. It's up there at the beginning of the word, no prefix, nothing's going to mess with it. And it's going to have its own vowel at the beginning of the word there. All right? So what am I talking about? So if we have nafal, what does nafal mean? To fall. No fall. Okay? We make it in a feminine. Nafila. Okay? This noon is up here. It has its own vowel, but nothing's going to mess with it. In the imperfect, we have a different situation, because in the imperfect, remember that prefix attaches to the front and it forms a closed syllable at the beginning. And when it forms a closed syllable, this noon is going to be in that state of not having a vowel, because it's at the end of a consonant. It's at the end of a syllable, and therefore it's going to assimilate. So the perfect is regular. So the one noon root has the potential to be weak, but not in the perfect paradigm. See how it's interacting with the paradigm? So it's nice for us in the perfect. It's going to be regular. Let's look at so, and it's always helpful to go back to our regular forms, okay? So the third person masculine singular of the imperfect is yiktol, right? It has this prefix. The yod prefix is telling us it's third person masculine singular and no suffix. All right, so let's put the root nun, pe, lamed, nafal, to fall into this form, okay? So we're going to get yin, pol. Okay? Yin, pol. Now, what's going on here? This is a weak dogish because this is a begad kafat letter. And since it's now beginning a syllable, it's getting that weak dogish. That's what it is. It's a weak dogish. It's not a strong dogish. It's not doubling. Okay? So this is actually the same pattern. Do you see that? Just with a different root. All right. Now, look what we have here. This nun with a shva, silent shva, yin. So this is the case where it's going to assimilate. So this nun is going to assimilate to this pe. You see that? Okay, so then it's going to go yip, or yif, pol. You see that? How the nun matched the following consonant. It assimilated to it. Okay. Still, as I'm writing this, that's a weak dogish. So, in linguistic discussions like this, they put asterisks to show that these are hypothetical forms. So I'm just showing you this so you see the processes. There actually are, no, these forms never appear. Okay, that's why there's an asterisk. But we're moving toward what we actually get. Okay, so if you have two consonants together, the way that's written in Hebrew usually is with the strong dagesh, which indicates the doubling of a consonant, right? So then we'll get Yipol, which is the actual form, the third person masculine singular form of the imperfect verb with the root nun, pe, lamed. Repeat after me. Yipol.
Yipol.
Yipol. And what we have here is what kind of dagesh? Strong dagesh. It's no longer a weak dagesh, it's a strong dagesh. Because this dagesh is communicating this double pay to us. Do you see how that works? So starting from our regular form yik tol, we try to put it into that form yin pol, yif pol, yip pol. That is the form that we're going to get in our paradigm. And it is all explained by this simple rule that when a nun is found on its own, without a vowel, in the middle of a word, it will assimilate to the following consonant, and that assimilation will be represented by a strong dagesh. Any questions about this? Ian?
Yeah, so in Greek, whenever we went over the second aorist, like the form of the word was so discontinuous with the first aorist that he just recommended that we memorize all of these second aorist irregularities as like vocabulary words. I'm wondering, how would you go? I would have a hard time like sort of working back in the genealogy to getting back to that root word that I had memorized. How do you, I don't know if I'm making any sense. Do you recommend that I just memorize that final form there of that word?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Good question. I don't. I recommend that you work on your vocabulary and work on your paradigms. And we're going to bring those two pieces of knowledge together to help us figure out verbs.
Okay.
Because it's too much to treat each one as an individual vocabulary item. You'd be overtaxing yourself. So, okay, we have vocabulary knowledge and we have the paradigm knowledge. And these two work together. They're going to help us together. So let's say we have this form, okay? Yipol. And let's say we have a hunch that it's a verb based upon the sentence that it's found in. Okay, so we're already thinking, okay, this is a verb. So how do we approach it? We're going to think, okay, so far, you know perfect and imperfect, right? So do I have features of the perfect or the imperfect? Well, I don't see any of those perfect suffixes. Right? None of those those would be recognizable here at the end. I don't see any of those. All the perfect forms have suffixes. I don't see that. Do I have a prefix here? Aha, I do. I have a yod. A yod could be a prefix. So at first you might be thinking maybe these are the three root letters, right? Yod, pe, lamed. But then when you see this yod here, you at least have to entertain the possibility this is an imperfect. But then you think, well, wait a second, I don't have three. I should have three root letters, but I don't. Is there anywhere I can find another root letter? And I look, aha, I see a strong dagesh. There could be another, that could be where the other root letter is here. That's the only way to explain what's happening with the strong dagesh here. What could be hiding in there? What could be represented by a strong dagesh? It could be a nun, because a nun's assimilated. So now I have nun, I'm thinking, okay, it could be nun, pe, lamed. So And having some knowledge of that root is going to help me to also to look for that, to say, well, could it be this? But that's the kind of reasoning that you're gonna go through, because you're gonna start to look for prefixes and suffixes and narrow it down. And then when you take off those prefixes and suffixes, do you have 3 root letters? If not, you have to find the other root letter. It's the case of the missing root letter. And in a few cases, it's possible 2 root letters are not there, and you have to reconstruct them. But you actually can do it based upon vocabulary knowledge and based upon the principles of how weak verbs act. Okay? That's a good question. But I think it takes more reasoning, but it's less overload on your memory than having to treat each one as an individual piece of information to store. All right, and so let's look at page 88 in the textbook. And you'll see that since there's a prefix on all the imperfects, as we go down the paradigm, this same phenomenon that I just showed you here is happening in each of these forms. The noon is assimilating. Okay? So let's actually take this opportunity to say the strong verb imperfect paradigm first, because that's the way it should work. Is in your mind you have this strong pattern, and then when you're looking at irregular forms, you're always comparing it against that strong paradigm. Okay, so which is why it's very helpful that Futato gives you both side by side. So let's do the strong one first, and then we'll do the weak one, and we'll see how this plays out. Okay, so repeat after me. Yikto, tikto, tikto, tikteli, ekto, yiktelu, tiktolna, tiktelu, tiktolna, niktol. Okay, next column. Yippol, tippol, tippol, tippali, eppol, yippalu, tippolna, tippalu, tippolna, nippol. So all of our suffixes are all there. They're all regular. See that? There's no change to the suffixes in the imperfect, where there are suffixes in the paradigm. And all of our prefixes are there, right? It's only the first root letter, which is assimilating to the second root letter, the pei, and showing up as a strong dagesh, all the way down the paradigm. So I don't need to learn each one as long as I know the principle by which that operates. Follow it? Okay. Now let's do something that's even odder or more irregular. That is the imperfect verb lakach. What does lakach mean? To seize or to take. Okay? Now, for some reason, lakach is going to act like it's natan. Because natan is a one noon root. It's actually notice it has 2 noons. And all noons can operate this way. That's the feature of a noon, not just a noon in the first position, it's the feature of a noon. That when it's found alone, without a vowel in the middle of a word, it can assimilate. So natan has 2 potentials for assimilation, the first noon and the second noon. But natan means what? What's that? To give. Yeah. It's the verb natan, to give. Matan, I think there's a noun formed from natan, matan, which means a gift. So natan means to give, and lakach means to take. So one proposal or one theory may be that because they're antonyms, natan, lakach, to give and to take, Maybe that's why lakach is a Natan wannabe. Because it doesn't make any sense based upon the root letter. Because what's the first root letter in lakach or lamed kof chet? What's that? Lamed. It's a lamed. This is not a feature of the lamed to assimilate. It doesn't. That's not. But in this case, it does. But it acts just like the noon. So in this case, even though it's strange that it's doing it, we actually know the principle by which it's operating. So we have to learn this. We can't store it in our memory based upon one noon. We have to learn it attached to that vocabulary item, lakach. And maybe you'll remember it as natan lakach, to give and to take. They both operate the same way with the assimilation of the first letter. Mark.
Yeah, so Futaro said that this is happening because the final consonant is a guttural and the theme vowel is pata. Is that like a standard rule?
Okay. Thank you for that. Just to clarify, when he's explaining that, he's not saying that's why the lamed assimilates.
Oh, okay.
He's saying this is why we have a patach instead of the cholim, the cholim.
Okay.
See, there is another change.
Yeah.
And he's going back to last chapter. He's going back to last chapter to say, why is it a patach and not a cholim? Well, that's because we consider it doubly weak. There's a chet at the end, right? And we know the rule of the gutturals is that they prefer A-class vowels under and before them. So he's explaining a second feature rather than the assimilation. Yeah.
Well, thank you for clarifying.
Sure. Yeah. So, but if you look at this, of the imperfect of lakach, you see that it is the exact same paradigm. The pattern is exactly the same as nafal, nun pe lamed. It's exactly the same. So the lamed is assimilating. But again, that's not a feature of a lamed. That's just a feature of this particular root. Okay, so let's read this. Let's read these together. Repeat after me. Yikach. Do you see where we are on 89? See where we are? Okay, let's all read it together. Tikach. Tikach. Tikachi. Ekach. Yikachu. Tikachna. Tikachu. Tikachna. Nikach. See, this is when it gets fun. Just reading Hebrew like that. You start to get the sound of what Hebrew sounds like when you read enough of it out loud like that. So it's as if this lamed is assimilated to the following kof. And it is doing that, but it's not doing it for any known reason, except by analogy. And sometimes this happens in language where there's not a direct reason why something is happening, except for it's imitating something else in the language. That's one feature of linguistic irregularity, is that there's analogy, which maybe is what's happening here.
This one, not getting this wrong. This is only for this word.
This is for this one root. Look at, he says, call imperfect of lakach. Now, why would we spend so much time on this verb? So that it gets its own whole section here in this chapter. It's pretty common, actually, to take, every time you take something, it's pretty much lakach. So it's a common word. But this also goes back to that linguistic principle that I've mentioned before, which is the more common, the more irregular. Right? That seems counterintuitive. Why would that be the case? That common things are more irregular because everybody uses them all the time, and it can handle the irregularity because everybody knows it. But if it's less common, it has to be regular so that people can figure out how to do it because they're not used to hearing it all the time. So I think this is another one of those examples of a very common verb that is irregular, and it's okay because everybody knows, hey, that's lakach. That's how lakach operates. So, but of course, there's a reason why we learn it here in this chapter, because the principle by which it's operating this way is according to the one nun pattern. But we need to attach this information now to the verb lamed kof chet lakach. Okay? All right. Any other questions about one nun? Who can restate for me the overall rule about nun that we're talking about here? Can you put it in your words? You can do it. Okay, Mark, brave guy.
That's right. So, if the noon is the close of the syllable, so
Okay.
it doesn't have a vowel,
Yes.
it will assimilate or become the following consonant, whatever that is. And then
Right.
that gets represented by a strong dagesh, and then the noon drops off.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. If the noon is without a vowel in the middle of a word, it assimilates to the following consonant. But you added some more details to specify it, and you did very well. So now, can you think of a situation in which this won't happen? When is it a situation where the noon won't assimilate? You know the answer to this. If you think about it. Tyler?
Imperfect.
What's that?
In my.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, in the perfect, because it doesn't have to. There's no prefix. But how about in a case where it actually was, it was found by itself without a vowel in the middle of a word, but it doesn't assimilate?
Oh, is it when gutturals that don't take a strong.
If it was followed by a guttural, because what do gutturals reject? They reject the strong dagesh. So you see how the things we're learning start to play off of each other now. And so we take each of these different, sections and things we're learning, and we start to put them together. We're going to have to put them together to start to recognize some of the more complicated forms. So, yeah, now we have information to recognize there could be cases, and there are, where the noon won't assimilate because there's a following guttural. Okay, but for now, we're going to move on to the third hay.
In that case, does the noon just stay as it is? Or...
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it can't assimilate to the guttural. In which case, it would actually be easier for us to recognize, right? Because it hasn't assimilated. But it's not following its typical noon-like behavior.
But it still wouldn't be strong because the guttural would make it weak.
It's still not, it's in this, technically it's doubly weak because it's still a weak root being a one noon. It has the potential for the assimilation even if it doesn't happen. And two, it has a guttural in the second position. So that's another weakness. And so in order to understand the form, we have to bring both of those sets of information to the explanation of it. And in that case, the resulting form is fairly easy to recognize because it actually has the noon for you, on offer for you to recognize the root. All right, let's move on to the third hay. So third hay is a subset of a third guttural. So it's a third guttural, but the hay has some of its own features. And in this case, these features result from the fact that there's a history of these roots. So languages change over time. Languages have histories. And there was a history of Hebrew language before we encounter it here in the Old Testament. And there's a history of the Hebrew language after we encounter it here. So sometimes we have to make appeal to the historical development of the language to see what's going on there. And in the case of third hay, it was probably originally a third yod root. A third yod root that became a third hey. There was some kind of standardization or leveling that these roots got a third hey letter. So, because in the stage of the language we're looking at now, we have the triliteral root system. And so there's always this desire to want to have 3 root letters, except in case of these irregular patterns when we sometimes don't. But so, like with the hollows, or in this case, putting the hey in there, kind of standardizing it, getting us nice, neat, strong, getting us those 3 root letters. So these third hey roots perhaps were originally third yods, and that became represented with the third hey. So the reason why is because in certain forms, from our perspective, it looks like the hey turns into a yod. But historically, that's actually the older form that's reappearing. All right, so the first thing to recognize is that this is our vocabulary form, our dictionary form, gala. And it's different from this is the third person masculine singular of the perfect. And the way it's different, instead of having a comets patach pattern as a comets pattern. And that's as a result of this hey here, or actually more appropriate to say the hey is a result of this, because what was originally the third yod was dropped, and then there is this long vowel here that's represented with the hey. So this hey is actually, remember we said that yods, vavs, and heys can be helping letters to mark vowels. It's really marking this vowel. But in the vocabulary list, you're going to recognize the third hey because it always has a comets hey ending. All right? So, as does the third aleph, which we've seen, but it has it for a different reason. That has it because the aleph became quiet or silent, and then the preceding vowel lengthened. So let's look at the features of the perfect third hey root, and then we'll look at the features of imperfect. All right, so first of all, if there's no suffix in the paradigm, so what we're doing is we're going back to those perfect and imperfect paradigms. Again, we constantly go back to that in the strong verb. If in the paradigm there is no suffix, then the last letter is a hey. No suffix equals comets hey. Okay? Just like we have here in the third person masculine singular. See, there's no suffix in the paradigm. We have the comets hey. Not to be confused with the third person feminine singular suffix, right? We'll see that. This is the masculine form, has a comets hey, so we don't want to get it confused with that. Okay? That's actually, it's filling in this root letter position here. Whereas if it was the third person feminine singular ending, the comets hey ending, you'd have 3 root letters and then the ending. All right, so first things first, if there's no suffix, it's a comets hey ending in the perfect. Second, if we have a consonantal suffix, it is a chirik yod. What's a consonantal suffix? Any suffix that begins with a consonant. So if you go back and you look at your paradigm, you'll see that some of them, like ta, that begins with a tav. Or tem begins with a tav, right? Some suffixes begin with a consonant. Some begin with a vowel, like e, chirik yod, or u, shurik. That's a vowel. So we haven't divided up the suffixes like this yet, but it's going to be handy for us to do so now, because the hey will appear differently depending on the type of suffix it's added. Okay, so no suffix, comments hey. Consonantal suffix is going to have a chiric yod before that suffix is added. You still have to add the suffixes because we still have to know what these forms are. So you're still going to have the suffix. This is what's going to happen to this hey. It's going to stay the same according to the dictionary form, or it's going to become a chiric yod. Or, number 3, if it's a vocalic suffix or a suffix beginning with a vowel, it's going to be dropped. Does that indicate drop to you? An X? Or maybe I should do it like this. There is no hey. How about that? No hey. Okay, so these are through the three things that can happen here. If there's no suffix, it's going to be a common hey at the end. If there's a consonantal suffix, before you add the suffix, you're going to add a chiric yod. This is that place where that original third yod seems to be appearing. This seems to be the original third root letter, the yod, appearing here in the paradigm, but only where it's followed by a consonant. And when it's followed by a vowel, there's no hey. The hey is missing. Or I say the hey runs away. Okay, the hey runs away when you have a vowel. It doesn't like the vowel. So let's look at some examples here. Okay, so in the third person masculine singular, gala. Okay, let's do consonantal second person masculine singular. Okay, what's the strong form? Katalta, right? Katalta. So here it's going to be galita. Galita. So you see how it looks like this hey turned into a yod, even though that's not historically what happened. In a way, the yod turned into a hey, but heuristically, as we learn it, we begin with the hey, we think that it looks like this hey turned into a yod, a chiric yod, before the same suffix. So we can still recognize this as the perfect. So we're looking at, we're working on perfect now, and we'll go to the imperfect. All right? Do you see how that works? And then the last one, so katelu, right? The third person common, plural, katelu, has a vocalic suffix. It's that shuric suffix, katelu. Okay?
Father Bott,
Yes.
in the book, it shows the tav, like losing the dagesh.
Oh. Yeah. You're right.
Why does that happen?
Yeah, that's happening. That's correct. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's happening because tav is a big odd kafat, and when it's preceded by a vowel, it's going to be soft.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for that. Yeah, in the strong paradigm, it does have it because it's beginning its syllable and it has no vowel before it. But here it's got a vowel before it, so it softens it. So yeah, technically no dagesh, weak dagesh. Okay, good. So katelu is a third person common plural of the perfect. But in this case, it's this third one. It's a vocalic suffix, the shuric, so we lose the hey and we have galu. Galu. So the hey is showing up with a comments. The hey seems to be becoming a chiric yod before the suffix is added, or the hey runs away if you have a vowel suffix. So those three things. There's one other unusual form, and we're about to look at that, the third person feminine singular. But so far, this explains everything else in the perfect paradigm. Okay, Gregory?
I have a question, I forget about it, I've forgotten. Why is there a strong dagesh in the initial you know?
It's not a strong dogish. You couldn't have a strong
Where
dogish.
is there doggish and narrow?
Yeah. So if it's not a strong dogish, it's a
Weak doggish.
yeah. And why would a letter have a weak dogish?
Time spacing.
What's that? Okay, because it's a big Ad Kafat letter. Gimel is a big Ad Kafat letter.
Quickly.
So whenever it begins a word or a syllable, it's going to have the hard sound.
Alright.
But if it, and that's what we're saying here, if it's preceded by a vowel, it's not, then it's going to have a soft sound, or we don't pronounce it as a soft sound. But that goes back to how the big Ad Kafat letters in the weak dogish operate. Okay. So yeah, if you see it at the beginning of a word, it's going to be a weak dogish, not a strong dogish. All right. So this is a third person common plural. Gala, galita, galu. Okay. Now, the weird one, the especially weird one, is the third person feminine singular. Okay. So what's the strong one is katela, right? Now, if we're gonna use this root, it's already a third hey, and then we're contemplating adding another hey. Now, Hebrews love the letter hey, and they like to make use of it, but even this is too much for Hebrews. Too many heys at the end. So let's think about it. Do we have any alternative feminine endings besides hey? Hey is the number one feminine ending.
A noon?
Hey, what?
A noon?
A noon?
Yeah, like in a plural, doesn't like the second person.
Oh,
feminine.
yeah, I see why you say that. Yeah, but that's not it. But I see why you say that. That's a good connection to make. Like tem, ten, hem, hen. That noon, good. But that's not it.
Nice try.
That's ta, right?
What's that?
Ta is a, feminine.
Okay. Ta, you say ta? Okay. Well, yeah, if we say tav, I'm not saying if you're saying it with the a vowel, but the tav, the letter tav, is a secondary feminine ending. Remember we've mentioned that before. So in this case, this is a prime opportunity for this. This letter is going to become a tav. And then we can add our comments hey onto the end of it. To Galata. So this is the third person feminine singular perfect. So you get a tav here before the comments hey suffix. This is not the part of the root. This is the suffix of the verb paradigm now. See? And this tav is taking the place of this. I'm sorry. This tav is taking the place of this root letter hey. So that's why it's important to keep in mind that we have this secondary tav letter that can be a feminine ending, and also it can take the place of this hey in a root, a third hey before another hey, because two heys is too many there. So that's really just we have these larger patterns for the perfect, and we'll see parallels in the imperfect, some parallels. But this is just the feature of the third person feminine singular in the perfect. Because it's only in that place in the paradigm that you would have a doubling up of heys. You see? And that's why it creates this issue of too many heys. We got to get a tav in there instead of the first one and then hey on. Yeah. So now we still, if we were approaching this verb to try to understand it, we'd say, okay, it looks like 3 root letters and a comments hey. That looks like comments hey suffix. Looks like the third person feminine singular suffix. But do I know gimel lamed tav? Well, no. First of all, I don't know that root. It's not a familiar root. And second, I have to remember, oh yeah, it's third person feminine singular, then this could be a hey. Could be hey. So, and then gala or gimel on hey, yeah, I do know that one. So that you just have to learn that as that one form, the third person feminine singular of the perfect. That comes into play there. Okay, but these three observations explain those other forms. So any questions about the perfect? Any questions about the perfect before we move on to the imperfect? Okay? So you see here that it's actually in the suffixes that we're having to deal with it, because this hey interacts with the suffixes. So that we're not worried about the prefixes. We were concerned about prefixes with the one noon because that's where it interacted. The prefix of the paradigm interacted with the noon of the root. And now we have this hey at the end. That's where it's going to interact with the suffix. So, so three observations about the imperfect. One, if there is no suffix, which happens more in the imperfect, then the ending is not common say, but segol hey. But we still have that hey showing up. Okay? 2 and 3 are the same. If you have a consonantal suffix, you get a chiric yod before adding the suffix. And if you have a vocalic suffix, or a suffix that begins with a vowel, you have the hey running away, or no hey. Okay, so for third hey, this is basically what you need to know. I guess there's the third person feminine singular form, which is peculiar, but in the perfect, you have these three observations. In the imperfect, you have these three, and there's a parallel between them. You see that? Follow me? So let's look at some imperfect forms. Using these principles over here, okay? Whoop. Okay, let's use gala again. The third person masculine singular. Yigle. Okay? Yigle. That's the first observation. When there is no suffix, which is the case in the third person masculine singular of the imperfect, when there's no suffix, the hey appears there, but not with a comment, but with a segol hey. Okay? So that's the first one. 2, let's see. We have to change this because this is not in the imperfect. That's not gonna. Okay. Gotta change this. Not a chiric. It's a segol yod, and actually that we can connect that to the segol hey. So it's actually in the these feminine forms in the plural. So let's do third person feminine plural. Sorry about that. I wrote that wrong to begin with. Okay. Which would be tiktolna in the strong paradigm. Tiktolna. That's where we have a consonantal suffix in the imperfect. So this would be tiglena. Tiglena. So it's the suffix na is beginning with the noon. It's consonantal. So we have before it a segol yod. So we can see connect this segel here, but we can also connect this yod across here with the consonantal suffix. Okay, and then of course the second person feminine second person feminine plural is identical. Tiktona in the paradigm. Same thing here. All right. And then the third person masculine plural is yiktalu in the strong pattern. Yiktalu. So we have a yod. Yiglu. Where's the hey? Well, let me write this down. This is a third person masculine plural of the imperfect. These are all imperfects. Yiglu. Well, it has a vocalic suffix, the shurik, so that hey ran away with the vocalic suffix, and we have no hey anymore. We just have the shurik suffix added on there. So here we have the three examples. When there's no suffix, segel hey. When the suffix begins with a nun, when the suffix begins with a consonant, in this case it happens to be a nun, segel yod. And then if it begins with a vowel, you have the hey run away, and you have just the vowel suffix added on there, yiglu. So in this case, when we know this, we look at this and we say, I see the tav and the na of the imperfect, prefixes and suffixes of an imperfect verb form. I'm trying to reconstruct my three root letters. Gimel, Lamed, Yod. I don't know that one. And in fact, that you never see a third Yod. It doesn't appear in roots. So I don't know Gimel, Lamed, Yod, but I do know Gimel, Lamed, Hey. And I have a reason why I can reconstruct that here, because it's third Hey appears as Yod. Or I see a Yod prefix and I see a shurik suffix. I know where that is in my imperfect paradigm. So I take those off, and what am I left with? Only two root letters, Gimel and Lamed. What could be the reason? Well, how could I reconstruct this third root letter? Well, if it's a third hey, it could run away because of this. So that's how the kinds of ways I put it to work if I see a form to try to figure out what it is first I look at prefixes and suffixes that I can take off, and then try to find three root letters and reasons why I might be missing one. We're learning the reasons why. Okay, any questions about how the third hey root works out in the imperfect paradigm? Let's say it together. So we're doing the imperfect paradigm. Actually, we didn't do the perfect out loud together. Let's do them both together now that we've covered them both. Let's go do them both together. So go back up to the perfect of the third hey on the top of page 90 in the textbook. Repeat after me. Gala.
Gala.
Galata.
Galata.
Galita.
Galita.
Galit.
Galit.
Galiti.
Galiti.
Galu.
Galu.
Galitem.
Galitem.
Galiten.
Galitem.
Galinu.
Galinu.
Now you'll notice I'm putting the accent in the same place that we learned it in the perfect paradigm. So you might want to write that in there in the second person masculine singular, Galita, and in the first person common singular, Galiti. It's on the second to last syllable. And then all the way down in the first person common plural, it's Galinu, is where the accent is. And elsewhere, it's on the last syllable, so I don't note it. Okay, that's the perfect. All right, so let's move on to the imperfect. Repeat after me in the imperfect paradigm. Yigle.
Yigle.
Tigle.
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 Tigli.
Tigli.
Egle.
Egle.
Yiglu.
Yiglu.
Tiglena.
Tiglena.
Tiglu,
Tiglu.
Tiglena,
Tiglena.
Nigle.
Nigle.
Any questions about the imperfect? So he doesn't really lay it out like this, but I think this is a helpful way, at least for me, to look at it and just kind of simplify it down and kind of get it in one place and see those relationships. So hopefully you took that down in your notes so you get this about the third hay. Now, I believe I've mentioned this before. Actually, at the beginning of class today we were talking about this, but we have to be able to combine this knowledge of different verb classes that we're learning, different weak verb classes, because we might have a certain type of weakness in the first letter and a certain type of weakness in the last root letter. So that would be considered doubly weak. It has two different types of weakness. So he gives you a couple of examples here, and we'll just look at these examples that he gives right now before we move on to do the vocabulary before our time's up. But if we look in the middle, okay, he has these three forms here. So he's giving you, on the outside, these singly weak verb forms, and then in the middle, one that combines those two weak irregularities, okay? So this is from the root ayin sin he. Ayin sin he. So what kind of weaknesses does it have? Whoop. Ayin sin he. What weaknesses does it have? How would we classify this according to our terminology of weak verbs? Ian?
As a one guttural and a three hay.
Okay, one guttural, three hay, yeah. And I'm glad you could have said three guttural, but it's actually even more specific than that. It's that subcategory of third hay that we just learned. So you did it just right. So it's a one guttural third hay, or three hay. So it's going to have both of those features, right? It's going to have the things we know about gutturals, which is that they reject the strong dagesh, they prefer A-class vowels, and they take chatefs instead of the regular shva. Right? Those are the three things we've learned so far about the gutturals as gutturals. Third hay as a subset has these features that we just looked at, depending on whether it's perfect or imperfect. And so here we have a perfect form. So look at actually, let's look at the outside ones first, and then we'll combine them. So on the right-hand side, we have ayin mem dalet, amad, to stand. Okay, and the strong form is kataltem, with a vocal shva at the beginning, kataltem. So that in this paradigm form, we would put a shva with a guttural. But that doesn't work. They take the chatef instead of the shva, so that what would have been a vocal shva becomes a chatef patach, because they also like A class, so they're going to tend to take chatef patach. So that's why we get the amad tem with a chatef patach in the first position. You see that? You see how that works? Okay, now let's go to the other side, and we see gala, gimel, lamed, hey, and it has the tem suffix, which begins with a suffix which begins with a consonant. So the hey is going to become a chirik yod, and we get gali tem. Okay? So now we go into asa. It's going to combine both those features. So we get in asa, ayin sin hey, we get asitem. Asitem. There's a chatef patach under the ayin, because it's a one guttural, and there's a chirik yod in place of the hay, because it's the third hay. See how we combine those two? So it's actually regular according to those rules of the weak verbs that we have learned. But we just have to draw on both of those sets of rules to understand this particular form. so let's leave it at that. That's illustrating well, I think, the principle that you can combine these weak verb principles in specific cases. Let's do our vocabulary list for today. So on page 91, we're looking at the vocabulary list, upper right-hand column. Repeat after me. Ozen. Ozen means ear. So when he marks it with blue like that, he's telling you the accent's on the first syllable. Anybody think of a mnemonic for Ozen? My Ozen. Ozen. I don't think I have one. Keep thinking about it. The next word is off. Repeat after me. Off. Off means nose or nostril, and it can be used in the dual, apayim, for the two nostrils. And it also means anger, because have you ever noticed when some people get angry, their nostrils flare? So by metonymy, this flaring of the nostril can mean anger. So it has both those meanings. First, learn nose, off, and then anger. Have you ever had your nose tweaked before? You know that trick you do on kids? You go, I got your nose. So you could say, if you rip someone's nose off, they'll be angry. Okay, the sillier they are, the better they work. So you gotta kind of swallow your pride sometimes on these mnemonics. Okay, let's do the next one. Repeat after me. Zeroa. Zeroa. The accent is on the chol and vav. Zeroa, because the patach under the ayin is a furtive patach. It's a sneaky one. Sneaky patach. Just sneaking in to help to pronounce the transition between O and the guttural. Because O is not a natural sound with the guttural. The guttural is like ah, right? So if you get, instead of going right from the O into the guttural, if you have O, ah, that ah will ease right into the guttural. Okay? So remember the furtive patach? We've talked about that before. So the furtive patach is never accented because it's not a full-fledged vowel. It's just a helper. It just helps pronounce the guttural. So zeroa means arm. So maybe if you're on a rowing team, zeroa uses his arm to row. Zeroa. Okay, next one. Repeat after me. Katef. Katef means shoulder. Any mnemonics for katef? I don't know. This is getting kind of violent here, but if you could cut off somebody's arm at the shoulder, I don't know. Katef. Sorry for all. I don't know. I feel bellicose today, I guess. Katef. Okay, let's keep moving on. Repeat after me. The first syllable is accented here. Ayin. Ayin means an eye. It kind of sounds like I. My ayin. Okay, up at the top. Repeat after me. Peh. Peh means mouth. And actually the pei, the name for that letter pei, and that letter pei looks like an opening mouth. Right? The pei. So you could connect that. Next one is, repeat after me. Panim. Panim means a face, and notice it has the masculine plural suffix because the face has a bunch of different pieces on it, a bunch of different features on it. So in Hebrew, when you look at it all, you put it in the plural to represent all those different, eyes and mouth, nose, ears. Panim. And panim is singular or plural. It's the same word for the singular face or plural faces. Repeat after me. Rosh. Means head. Reshit means beginning. See head in there in that word. And finally, regel. Regel means foot. We snuck it in there. We got our foot in the door, right at the end. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you. May I have your practices, please?